it sustains as long as you have breath. Drums don't have sustain. Drums just have attack. So the only way for us to get sustain is to put a bunch of attacks in a row. So if I want something that lasts a full beat, I have to put a bunch of notes in a row. And I can either do that with a really articulate pattern like double strokes, or I can do it with a really sloppy pattern like buzzes. But either way, I'm getting sustained by doing that. But that comes from pinching the stick in your hand and using full compression to get down the drum. Great question. Other questions? Yes?
Favorite mnemonics for polyrhythms?
I'm sorry?
Favorite mnemonics for polyrhythms?
Favorite mnemonics for polyrhythms? Okay, my favorite, so he's saying mnemonics for polyrhythms, there are these things called polyrhythms where you're playing two rhythms at the same time. So like here, I'm going, so my left hand is doing this, my right hand is doing this. And there's ways to, you can relate those rhythms verbally. My favorite one is this. This is where you have a dominant eighth note against a quarter. And my favorite way to articulate that is pass the gosh dang butter. Pass the gosh dang butter, pass the gosh dang butter, pass the gosh dang butter, pass the gosh dang butter. It's quite a bop. Good question. Next question. Yeah. And it can be anything. We're not picking here. I also am still having a lot of trouble seeing people visualize that. Yeah. What's the coolest stick spin I can do? This is a man who knows how to ask you questions. So there's a lot of them. I learned a lot of them in marching percussion. The rock and roll twirl is a very classic one, mostly because it's pretty easy and you can do it forever. Like as long as, once you figure it out once, you can just do this continuously and it's pretty easy. The craziest one that I've ever learned, which I don't have a good success rate on, so we're gonna see me heck up here in a second. Basically, you hold the sticks in your hands and you roll one of them over and then catch it and then fling it back to yourself. So if I do it right, it's gonna look like this. So I like that one, but I'm not very good at it. That's probably my favorite one. And then the favorite one that has an actual playing application is one called a Haimon, which is where you're holding your stick in traditional grip like this, and then you let go of the stick and then turn it all the way around your hand so it looks like you're waving hi to your mom. You're like, hi mom. But you can play it on drum. Like you can have that actually be a stroke. So that's my favorite one that actually has a playing application. Yeah, good question. Next question. Yes?
Did you start on drum set or snare drum and why?
Did I start on drum set or snare drum and why? Okay, so I have been playing drum set now for 13 years, something like that. I don't remember exactly when I started. It was a very gradual process. It's not like I joined the 6th grade band and that was it. I started playing roughly when I was 16. I call it the start of 2011, so that's 13 years on drum set. And I started marching percussion when I joined high school band, which was in my senior year of high school when I had been drumming for 2 years. And I did not start on a marching snare drum. I started on cymbals. And then when I went to college, I did 1 year of cymbals, 2 years of tenors, and then my last year was on snare. And the only reason I switched to the snare drum is for tenor drums. And for those of you who don't know what tenor drums are, those are the quads where you wear them. There's like the 4 drums in front of you, and they like go down the drums, and they do the crazy crossovers and all that stuff. They're very fun to play, but they're also extremely heavy, and I'm extremely not. And so I swapped to a lighter drum, which is why I played this. And I've been playing drum set much longer, and I love drum set way, way more. If you had to give me a choice between a drum set or a marching snare drum, I'm taking the drum set every time. Good question. Other questions? Yes? How do you differentiate single bass drums from polyrhythm? Is that what you're asking? Oh, syncopations from polyrhythm. Like, is that asking what type of polyrhythms there are, or? Yeah, I mean, so there's not. So polyrhythms are a thing where like you can build as many polyrhythms as you want based off simpler rhythms. So what I mean by that is if I have this, and I can just go the exact same pulse, or double that pulse, or 3 times that pulse, or 4 times that pulse, or 6 times that pulse, and those are all polyrhythms. Or you can have it based on a faster subdivision. I have 2 notes here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. You can have as many of them as you want. And those syncopations all come from just starting with one bass rhythm and relating every other type of rhythm and hook off of that. But there's technically as many as you want. If that answers your question. Good question. Next question. Any non-drummers have a question? I do love the drummer questions, yes.
If you could give a fairly novice drummer one rhythm, challenge their running chalk, what would it be?
If I could give one novice drummer a fairly challenging rhythm to challenge their chops.
Give it up.
One rhythm.
What?
One rhythm.
To be like, this is the thing that you build yourself on.
Okay, so, that's kind of a complicated question because rhythms are not actually anything in and of themselves. Rhythms are only related to tempos, which are only related to pulses. So like for example, if I'm playing at this rate, there's no way of telling how fast that is unless you have a pulse to base it off of. So for example, this is like 170 beats a minute. That's quarter notes at 170 beats a minute, but that's 16th notes at whatever that is, 42 beats a minute. And so that's what I mean by that. A good rhythm for them to learn is just 16th notes, which are just alternating right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. That's a great rhythm, and it's not terribly difficult to play fast either. Everybody, so here's a life hack for y'all. If I am playing two sticks at the same time, and when I play this, I am literally playing the exact same speed. The only difference is my left hand is shifted forward in between my right hand notes, but my hands are moving at the same rate. And what you can tell is if I put this on this rim, you can tell my right hand is not changing when it switches to this faster, quote-unquote, faster rhythm. You see what I mean? So learn 16th notes, learn alternating right, left, right, left, left, and know that it's not as hard as you think, because your hands aren't actually moving any faster than if your left hand is just playing an eighth note. That's what I would say. Good question. Other questions? These are good questions so far, by the way. Yes?
Approach a different style of music for the first time that you never played before.
How do I approach a new style of music if I've never heard it before?
Yeah.
Okay, good question. So, if I am learning a completely new genre of music from scratch, the first thing I would do is go to Wikipedia, look up the genre, look up the famous artists who play that genre, and start listening to some of the more popular versions of that. I will tell you this, you can learn how to play reggae from just about anywhere, but why would you learn it from someone that isn't Bob Marley? You can learn everything you need to know about reggae drumming from listening to Bob Marley. And that's not to say that reggae is an overly simplistic music genre that, is really easy to learn. It's not, but all the formulas and all the secrets are there. So when I'm approaching a new genre, I go and research it, and I listen for patterns. I listen for reggae, I'm like, okay, so they don't always put a bass drum on one. Okay, they are doing these constant offbeat increments in the hi-hat. And these are patterns that I'm picking up that are consistent from song to song. And that's part of what characterizes this genre on my instrument, so I'm going to, when I'm starting to learn, I'm going to start with doing that. Class example, very recently I started Afrobeat drumming. So when I learned Afrobeat, I went and listened to Fela Kuti, and I went and listened to Tony Allen. And I watched Tony Allen play videos on YouTube and watched his drumming, and I was like, okay, what is he doing? He's holding these sticks like this, that's really weird, but it's getting him that really light tone. I like that. And I noticed that he's doing this sort of thing with his snare drum and this sort of thing with his kick drum. So that's what I would do when I research this drum. Good question. Next question. Yes?
What aspect of drumming have you found most difficult to master?
What aspect of drumming have I found most difficult to master? That is an excellent question. Next question. Man, that really is, I think, traditional grip took me a long time to figure out. For those of you that don't know the difference, so when you hold the sticks the same way with your hands on top of the stick, that's called match grip, where you have both your hands on top of the stick, playing like this. Sometimes you see drummers hold their sticks like this. This is called traditional grip. The reason that this exists is because in the Civil War, when they wore sling harnesses, the drum sat at this angle relative to the player. Now you can play match grip on a drum like this, but my elbow is in this very uncomfortable position. So what they decided to do was they decided to hold the stick from underneath so that their elbow could relax down here, and they could still play on this crooked drum without causing long-term fatigue. Now, the reason that we still use traditional grip, there's three reasons. One, if you want to adhere to tradition, you play with traditional grip. If you go see any legitimate marching percussion ensemble, their snare drums will always play with traditional grip to maintain that. The other cool thing about it is that it gives you really interesting prospects in volume control, which I suspect is why most jazz drummers use it, because you can change how much of the beat is hitting the drum by just tilting your wrist up. So if I'm turning at this speed, If I just tilt my hand up, I'm still turning my hand the same way. I'm just tilting it up so less of the beat is hitting the drum. So it's a lot easier to play quieter on a snare drum for like jazz drum set by just tilting your hand up. And the most important reason to play is it just looks really freaking cool. So that's why we play it. But learning it took me a while because it's not terribly intuitive when you first learn it and how to hold the stick and how to rotate your wrist to get the motion. So that was probably it. There's probably a better answer, but that's the first one that comes to mind. Good question. Next question. Yes?
How much time do you practice a week?
How much time do you practice a week? Nowhere near as much as I should, and nowhere near as much as I used to. When I was in college, I played in college marching bands, I played in college concert bands, I played in the UW Steel Band, I played in music ensembles all the time, but when I wasn't playing, I was practicing because there was nothing else to do. And so back then, I probably practiced like at minimum 10 hours a week, probably closer to like 15 or 16. Now, it's probably like 4. Some weeks I don't practice at all. Some weeks I'm so busy or I'm out of town or anything like that, and even if I have a practice pad, I'll like diddle on it for 20 minutes and then I'll call it good. But realistically now I would say 4. Which is not to say that I love the drums any less, but there's a lot more things to do when you're not in college. And when you don't have something that's actually built in your day that requires you to practice for it, you're not going to practice as much. So yeah, not as much as I should. Probably about 4 hours a week. Good question. Next question. Yes, right there.
Would you recommend a good drum setup for apartment sellers who don't?
A good drum setup for an apartment. Oh, you hit the nail right on the head. So, there are 3 ways to practice in an apartment. And I know this because I lived in a dorm when I was in college. The best way, I think, is to just practice with a practice pad. For those of you that don't know, there is, actually, all right, can you grab my practice pad? It's right over there. A practice pad is a slate of rubber that replicates the rebound of an acoustic drum. And you just hit it. It makes no noise. It does absolutely nothing. And these are with really loud sticks and a really loud practice pad. With an apartment, it won't make too much noise, and if you play it at normal times of day, it's not going to matter. The other thing you can do is you can make a drum set out of these with practice pads and these things called 80 cymbals. 80 cymbals are cymbals where they're made out of like a brass alloy, but they have holes throughout the entire cymbal. And when you hit it, it has the exact rebound of an acoustic cymbal, but it is 80%. It's 20% of the volume. 80% of it is gone. And it's really quiet. You can bash those things all night. And because it's a really high frequency, it doesn't carry through walls or floors. So you can get those and practice pads and you'll be pretty set. If you do that, I would recommend for the kick drum practice pad to put a blanket over it, because that will kill a lot of the attack and make it less steady. It's like the difference between, it's the difference between this and this. So that will help a lot. And then the other thing to do is to get an electronic set. If you get an electronic drum set, try to get as good of one as you can, because the cheaper ones will rob you a lot of the authenticity of playing a real drum set. There have been a lot of and I started off on an electronic drum set. Actually, I started for an acoustic kit for a year and then played mostly an electronic set for 3 years after that. It will rob you of a lot of the feel of playing an acoustic drum set, and that means that you're going to not understand how rebound works the same and how dynamics work the same. Because on a drum set, if you hit it this hard and this hard, the drum set will register it as that hard every time, no matter your variance. So it will be hard to adjust the dynamics if you have an electronic set unless you get a better, higher end one. But electronic sets are a good way to go. Good question. How much time do I have? 1 minute. Okay, last question, right here. What's the ideal height for a drum throne? Good question. So, perfect. Alright, so when I'm sitting at this drum throne, because I reset my throne up every time I play a gig or every time I do a show, including this. So when I set up my throne, I sit so that my feet are over each pedal, my snare drum is right in between my legs, and that my thighs are angled slightly down, ever so slightly down. You don't want more than that. You do not want your butt below your knees. You have your butt below your knees, it's going to be a lot harder to lift your legs to get good attacks out of your feet. So don't put it too Don't put it too low. Get it high enough where you have your knees a little bit lower than your hips. And that should be good. On the pedals themselves, I like to keep my feet firmly on the pedal when I'm sitting in a standby position. But that also means there are some drummers that prefer to have their drum thuds high enough where their toes are like just barely touching the pedal. And that's good for faster bass drumming because you're flexing the front of your foot a bunch. So when you're doing like this, you want to not, it's easier if your foot is higher up because you're just flexing the front of your toes down and that's where they are naturally. Otherwise you have to lift your leg up and then flex to the front of your toe, which is a little bit difficult. But yeah, I would just say make sure that your hips are slightly above your knees. That's the way to do it. Cool. I believe that is the last question. That's all I have time for. I will say, if anybody wants to learn more in between jams or anything like that, please feel free to come talk to me. I would love to answer anything that you can. And I really am grateful for your attention. Thank you very much.
Everybody, give it up for TJ Orgovan.